There's been a lot of talk about the chaos occurring over at CD Projekt Red. For example, this recent tweet from Pirate Nation says, several top devs from CD Projekt Red have formed a new studio called Rebel Wolves. CD Projekt Red joins BioWare, Obsidian, Platinum Games, and other Ship Theseus studios who've lost pretty much all their actual talent. Of course, you can also put Rocksteady on that list, as they lost co-founders who fled the company to form 100 Star Games, taking a number of the top devs along with them. And so the situation currently unfolding with CD Projekt Red is reminiscent of how things have unfolded for those other dev studios. And so many people are understandably speculating that there could be a lot of division between the old talent at these companies and the new hires, and how the new hires and the new leadership want to go down this whole path of embracing DI policies and stuff like that. You know, instead of focusing on actually making a good game, things that these studios used to find important. And so the old talent's like, you know what? We don't need to stay on board with this. We can go do our own thing. And as you can see, some of them are doing just that. Ideologically, these people may not want to support those lame corporate policies, and financially, they may not want to see the repercussions of supporting said policies too. For example, we recently discussed this chart of game DI versus non-DI effectiveness, peak player counts according to SteamDB, and listing and comparing a number of games that were released this year. We've got like SSK, the JL, Concord, Dustborn, Outlaws, Veilguard, Flintlock, Honor 9 Awakening on the top, and you can see like some of the worst numbers you could possibly get for a new release. And then you got Pal World, Helldivers 2, First Descendant, Black Myth Wukong, Marvel Rivals, Space Marines 2, and Path of Exiles 2, with amazing numbers. It's really funny too, I mean the whole list is funny, but also funny side note, I've seen some of the DI embracers, the DI slop defenders, trying to argue that Marvel Rivals actually embraces DI, and it's like, what kind of cope are you trying to huff? And so going back to this whole CD Projekt Red thing, the newest studio split, so to speak, you can see on CDPR's website that they definitely do embrace the DI stuff, which isn't surprising probably to most people, but bear with me. Because did you know back in 2018-ish, they were getting accused of transphobia, and shortly after that, they began doubling down on all their DI practices. In 2020, a thread over on Reset Era was titled, CDPR is a transphobic company. It's time we stop making excuses for them. And posting a bunch of screenshots to go along with those claims. We'll take a look at some of that in a moment. The thread ended up going viral over on Reset Era and getting a ton of support. Top comments such as, thank you for compiling all this. Anytime someone either genuinely isn't caught up on CDPR's transphobia or are playing dumb, they can just be linked to this thread. Another saying, thank you OP, bookmarking this thread for sure. You don't even need to look at Cyberpunk to realize that there's something terrible going on in CD Projekt Red. Just one playthrough to Witcher 3 is enough to realize that they are as sexist as it gets. And I mention Witcher 3 because it's the game of the series I have played most extensively. But I remember rolling my eyes when Vess, Roche's right hand and a supposedly seasoned warrior and soldier, appeared in a scene, shaking her hips, and with a shirt that barely covered her breasts enough in Witcher 2. I can't believe that, guys. She was shaking her hips. It was terrible. They're a darling in the industry even here, but if the Witcher series is a good example of how they treat female characters, their transphobia was easily predictable. Plot twist is that person eventually got banned for something over on Reset Era. But anyways, we'll take a look at one more post here, and just keep in mind this is a few examples of hundreds of posts supporting the OP. This one saying, very informative post that should be shared everywhere. Anyone supporting CD Projekt Red at this point is knowingly funding hate. And so, hopping to the OP now, let's check out some of their claims against CDPR. On the 20th of August 2018, the official Cyberpunk Twitter posted this tweet response. Ryan had said, I want more guys. And Cyberpunk Games says, did you just assume their gender? The OP writing, this initial instance can seem innocuous on the surface, but it's a transphobic line conjured around outrage culture, quote unquote, and the notion that trans people are looking to be offended, which naturally is a common pushback from people that are being offensive, and how this joke is usually employed. Trans people don't respond to being misgendered with, did you just assume my gender, quote unquote. In fact, most trans people are terrified of even raising the fact that they are being misgendered. Contesting this is something that can frequently put you in harm's way, and unless you're speaking to an out ally, it's always a dice roll as to how it will be received. Often it will be through mocking, and this is where the point of transphobic jokes is worth highlighting. It renders our identities as fanciful and frivolous, something to be tolerated instead of accepted. When trans identities aren't taken seriously, it directly affects our ability to live as who we are. There is no distinction between the joke and transphobia, because transphobia has persistently centered itself around the notion that we are a joke. In response, Cyberpunk posted this. We can see this tweet from August 21st, 2018, so the next day. They say, sorry to all those offended by one of the responses sent out from our account earlier. Harming anyone was never our intention. Back at the OP, they say a couple of months later, on the 22nd of October 2018, the Twitter account for CDPR's online storefront, GOG, posted this tweet. The tweet reading, "Classic PC games hashtag won't be erased on our watch." Yeah, how's that for some use of hashtags? The OP then says that this was essentially making light of the hashtag won't be erased, which was trending on Twitter at the time, over a Trump administration memo that would work toward the erasure of trans identities. And that GOG had also used their Twitter account to appeal to the alt-right fanbase by posting a tweet around the death of journalism and Gamergate. Well, let's take a look at that tweet, shall we? Once again from 2018, this one on July 17, 2018, says, "A game that wears its heart on its sleeve, a sleeve that is rarely safe for work. Postal 2 Paradise Lost, no filter, no DRM," including the screenshot that mocks games journalism to go along with the tweet. The OP then goes on to accuse Cyberpunk 2077, the game itself, of being transphobic, saying that the game has harmful depictions of trans women. And their details for such reasons are a bit explicit, so we're going to be skipping that. We can take a look at these other claims, though, where they say, after speaking heavily to how inclusive Cyberpunk 2077 would be, it's been confirmed that the character creator will tie the pronouns the game uses to refer to the character with the pitch of voice chosen. Meaning that if you choose a traditionally female body type, but select a deeper voice, your character will be referred to as a he or him in the game's dialogue. Voice pitch is a sensitive issue in the trans community, and with transition as HRT has no bearing on your voice when transitioning as a trans woman or toward trans feminine identities. As a direct result, it becomes something that many trans people are conscious of when they attempt to pass, as it's an element that works against you when people frequently associate a deep voice to being a man and a high-pitched voice to being a woman. Finally, the OP also talks about a time when Cyberpunk 2077 tweeted a cosplayer finalist. They say that the issue here is the finalist that they picked is a cisgender woman cosplaying a trans woman, specifically the character from the mix-it-up advertisements that you find in-game. They ultimately conclude by saying CDPR are content to exploit both their workers and trans people for financial gain, alongside courting an obvious and loud alt-right fanbase, and that they're happy to foster a toxic work environment, grinding their workers to the bone, and are happy to lean into the chud fanbase they know they've garnered over the years. Okay, so that's all to say that between 2018 and 2020, as you saw, they began to get a lot of heat in places like Reset Era. And in 2018, they officially put their diversity policy in place. On their own website, they say diversity and inclusion. CD Projekt has had its diversity policy in place since 2018. This policy sets core values upon which our organizational culture is based. CD Projekt is also a signatory of the Diversity Charter. It is an international initiative under the auspices of the European Commission that obligates us to forbid discrimination in the workplace and take action to create and promote diversity and engage team members and business partners in such actions. And since then, it seems like they've only further delved into DI practices. For example, in 2023, they joined the hashtag Say Hi to Diversity campaign, also creating a write-up on equitable practices, saying, "We're not afraid to stand for what we believe in. By implementing inclusive benefits and creating a space where everyone can be themselves, we create a positive example for other companies and help affect positive social change." A quote from their Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion Director says, "We believe that talented and passionate people are our biggest strength, and creating a safe and inclusive workspace helps us create more room for them in the industry and at our company." It's interesting how egotistical these statements come off, specifically where they talked previously about engaging their business partners to embrace diversity and how they positively affect social change. It comes off very preachy and soapboxy, but hey, as we've seen time and time again, this is some of the actions that corpos take to try and appeal to ESG funds. And in the case of companies like CDPR and Activision Blizzard, etc., also often see them embrace DI practices after they come under fire from places like Reset Era and or have misconduct allegations going on in their companies. They'll try and brush that stuff under the rug by using things like inclusivity as a shield. And here's where things continue to get very interesting, because on October 11th, it was reported that CD Projekt boss pushes back on conspiracy theories, quote unquote, against diversity in gaming, saying, "We live in times where anyone can record complete nonsense and make a story out of it." The boss being referenced here, specifically being joint CEO Mikhail Nowakowski. And this part of his statement has aged terribly, where he said, "CD Projekt Red talent leaving? We have the lowest rotation of people in recent years. DI-driven recruitment? We hire based on merit and talent alone, just as we make games driven by artistic vision alone." But as we discussed earlier, there's been more and more news coming out about former CD Projekt Red devs leaving CD Projekt Red and hopping over to this new studio, Rebel Wolves, which was founded by former CD Projekt Red devs, and they'll be showcasing a tiny first glimpse, quote unquote, of their upcoming game, The Blood of Dawnwalker, on January 13th, 2025, so in just a few weeks. Over on the website for Rebel Wolves, you can't find any sort of listing, any sort of page for DI policies, at least that I could see. This is, of course, a complete juxtaposition to CDPR's website, where they have entire pages dedicated to their DI policies, which only further reinforces the speculation that the division and fracturing between these two companies could be directly correlated to the direction that CDPR has been going regarding these DI practices. Of course, there may be some other reasons involved too, but it does seem like the speculation regarding what we just mentioned does absolutely have merit. And that's where I'll conclude this one for today. Let me know what you think about all this stuff in the comments. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead, and if you enjoyed my coverage, consider liking and or subscribing. Appreciate ya, and I'll see you in the next one.